version of it is acceptable.
Okay.
Except the very far-fetched, crazy one, like
What would be a far-fetched, crazy one?
Paquette. I don't know. I've heard things. When I first started, I was working with. I'm French Canadian first. It's a French Canadian name, and I was working with people from Texas, and they were calling me over the phone. That was before the internet. I'm that old, and they were pronouncing my name in ways I can't even remember because it made no sense at all.
Well, I'll get it close. So we're here with Yanick Paquette. He is
good enough. I approve this pronunciation.
He recently completed Wonder Woman Earth 1 Volume 2. That's a mouthful. With Grant Morrison. He also recently did an issue of Action Comics with Brian Bendis. And I just want to start talking about Wonder Woman Earth 1. You're creating this world that is similar to what we've seen before, but it's obviously a new take on it. So when you're given a blank canvas like that on a new world, what are the types of things you like to throw in there? What are the things that you have fun drawing that you can bring into a new world like that?
Yeah, well, the thing I love the most is really world building, like trying to figure out what kind of architecture or what kind of culture can I come up with. In the case of Wonder Woman, I mean, the stuff is well known for years and years, but the point of Earth 1 in general is to recreate, like put stuff back into the oven and see what we can come up with. And in the case of Wonder Woman, we had to create an entire culture out of the principle that, contrary to what the Perez or even the Azzarello era is, which is those women are trapped on the island and then they remain basically pretty much Greek.
Right.
The idea of Grant was that, well, for 3,000 years they must have evolved and created a culture of their own or developed a technology, and so it allows us to create some sort of a world of sci-fi almost and haute couture type.
What was your personal favorite little touch you were able to throw in there?
I don't know. There's so many. After two volume now, the second volume is a lot easier because I've already created some sort of the basic structure of it. But the fun is really to trying to find out what are the seed of a culture. So in the case of these Amazonian women trapped on an island, had the Greek culture, but also birds and seashells and the woman figure. So these would be the element in which you would draw inspiration on to create the rest of what a machine and flying object and things like that.
Does that make it a more challenging project when you're tasked with creating this whole world versus like the Action Comics issue you just did? You're taking over essentially a story somebody else began, and it's set in our world more or less. So how does that change your approach when you're working between those two kinds of situations?
Yeah, well, as an artist, it's always my main pleasure is to create everything, and then I can own it.
Right.
And I tailor-made the stuff so it works with the story, but also with what I like to draw. So I make stuff that fit with my character and my way of doing things. And because of that, I always kind of favor those kind of projects. If I can get into a book at issue 1, or like Swamp Thing or something like that, or it's better. In part, also, it's because not only it's the question of design, but one of the things that I like to do is to try to find out some sort of code for panel borders. This is something I did with something and project before that, and it's there in Wonder Woman Earth 1, Volume 1, and even more in Volume 2, where panel border has an important meaning. And so if you're there at the beginning of a book and you create like a structure of panel border that are meaningful, it makes sense. If you drop in the middle of a monthly book and say, "Oh, I'm going to create some new rules for the panel border," it might be problematic. Although in Action Comic, I sort of did. There's a scene there. It's not spoiling anymore.
No, it's out already. Yeah,
it's out, so it's legit to talk about. There's a scene in it where Clark Kent is at the office at the paper, and somebody's coming with a kryptonite in her purse, and it does affect the panel border and Clark Kent at the same time. And so the panel border are this kind of symbolism of how bad he feels, and when he feels better, panel borders are going back to classic. But because that was a little moment, into the story, I managed to take that liberty, but I usually won't venture out of my way and try to be very classical when I'm doing a fill-in or a book in between stuff. But yeah, when you're creating stuff from the get-go, you can make your own rules. So
Now, you've been drawing comics for a long time now. That sort of playing with the structure more, playing with the panels and all that. Did that come to you right when you started making art, or is that something that has evolved as your art has evolved over the years?
yeah, well, it did evolve. At first, I was very, very classic, I would say, and I recommend everybody to start classic first, go crazy after. Don't go crazy first because you lose track of things. I think when you're confident enough with your work, when you've iron out most of your problems with anatomy and perspective and all that stuff, you can start to think about, what can I bring more to the table? What can I explore? And the idea of using the medium of comics, the page, the design, the panel borders, came about as some sort of way to justify comics by opposition to other media. I mean, if you play with the design of a page or the panel border, you can do things that movie can't, or a play or a book or whatever, a music can't. Right. And these are elements that are specific to the medium that I'm using. And if we're not using what we can do with our medium, it's almost like we're giving up, or a comic will now be only the step before the movie. It's pretty much the same, but it doesn't move. It's like movie screens that don't move. But if we take fully advantage, we defend the medium as something that can be that can survive whatever evolution in the future, as an art form.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask about Grant Morrison for a second, because you work with Grant on both volumes of this book, and Grant is one of the most unique storytellers of his generation. And when you get a Grant Morrison script, what about it is different than when you get a script from somebody else? What does Grant put in his scripts that's so unique and original?
Yeah, well, everybody is different. Grant director. Grant never asked me to draw stuff I've done before. First, I don't know how he does it, but I'm getting the script a few pages at a time, and our dialogue, we almost never talk through email or in person. Even we did last year here in New York, but it's super rare. We talk to the work, really. So he's going to give me like 10, 20 pages, and then I'm going to draw them and then look at them and create the rest of the story, kind of. I'm pretty sure he has a huge plan in advance, but he will adapt to whatever I might come up with, because the script itself is, and I know it's different with other people. I've seen Grant Morrison's script for Quietly, for instance, where everything is super well defined and super well planned, and there is some scene in Wonder Woman 1 Volume 2, it's a mouthful indeed, that are like that, like very well described and very specific. But a lot of the time, the way we ended up working it's pretty, I don't want to say vague, because all the craziness is his and all the structure is his, but it's very open to interpretation somehow, and maybe feel like confident enough to give me that liberty, and I feel now confident enough to take that liberty that he gives me, and I enjoy it.
Very cool. Last questions. We're sitting in this booth surrounded by pictures of all these DC characters. Is there a DC character you would like to get a nice long one or a graphic novel on? Who's the guy or girl that you want to dig into for a nice chunk?
I don't know. I was thinking about that recently, because after Wonder Woman would be done, I need to sink my teeth into something else. I love weird stuff. Maybe Deadman? I don't know. I'll have to think about it.
Deadman sounds fun.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
All right, man.